Welcome, eCom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
There's only two ways to incentivize people, or two ways to get people to change. One is through incentive, and one is through repercussions. And what I mean by that is either you're going to pay me more to do something, or you're going to punish me for not doing it.
Welcome, eCom Logistics Podcast Nation. Nanad and I are excited to welcome Eddie Hertzman, founder of Sourcing Journal, which was acquired by Penske Media Group and part of Fairchild Media Group. Eddie brings a really interesting perspective in global sourcing with a concentration on soft goods. And we definitely look forward to diving into the connection to supply chain trends and what Eddie's crystal ball is telling us about the future. Eddie, great to have you join us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Welcome, Eddie.
Welcome, buddy. Let's set the stage for everyone first by having you give your background story and, as Simon Sinek would say, the why behind Sourcing Journal.
So I feel most people know me today, obviously, because of Sourcing Journal. But the truth is I'm not really a media guy. My background is in sourcing and wholesale. I spent about a decade primarily in South Asia, Dhaka, Karachi, India, China, Vietnam, working for some of the largest retailers and wholesalers. So that's how I really got into the business, worked for quite a big agency group, ended up heading up their North America operations. So it really got me exposed to everyone from the Zaras of the world down to the 7th Avenue Garmento. And it was really in 2009 when the world was going through this cotton crisis, and every day the prices kept going up, 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 and up. No matter what I quoted, I couldn't hold the price for more than 24 hours. I just remember this. I remember it vividly, sitting in Dhaka trying to place 100,000 units of a very prominent brand. And the sourcing director said to me when I said, if you don't buy it today, it'll be more expensive tomorrow. He said, kid, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. You're wrong. It was just one of those moments where it just hit me. I'm like, how is there no resource for this? There's got to be the Wall Street Journal of sourcing. Let me create the sourcing. So I bought the domain, started aggregating some things, and 10,000 people signed up, 20,000 people. Then I started doing proprietary content. Then I started, from a bedroom operation to 2017, sold it to Penske Media Group. Great organization. I mean, from the Variety to Deadline to Hollywood Reporter, Billboard, South by Southwest, WW. I mean, it's unbelievable what Jay has built. And having the reputation and the resources behind us, our business has really taken off. And you could also argue that it's a little bit of lightning in a bottle. Who would have thought 12 years ago or 13 years ago now when I started that the whole world really shifted from front end being the most important, the runway, the sales, the marketing, to now it's all about the supply chain. It's all about logistics. It's all about sourcing. It's all about sustainability. So if you don't have that right, it's been a wild couple of years, to say the least.
Absolutely. And, we were talking to a few people that were like, we are also seeing new talent emerge within this space, right? Talent that didn't find this arena to be sexy, right? Like everyone wanted to go work in tech or in marketing or, those fields, right? Like production, runways, etc. Now you are seeing really good talent, really willing to step into the supply chain, because definitely I think supply chain sexy, but it is starting to become more sexy, right? Like it's everyone knows what we are talking about now. So
it's interesting because I like to say that the CSO is the new CEO. If we look at H&M, look at who is running the company now. She didn't come from the sales side. Sourcing and sustainability is where she came from. And I think that for the first time and maybe ever, we have a seat at the table. We're in the boardroom. And you're not throwing a tech pack at us and saying make this for 5 cents cheaper. You're realizing that if you don't have merchandise, well, you don't have sales. And if you don't comply to regulation, you could have legal issues, and you could be, you could have greenwashing claims, or you could also be canceled by your consumers overnight on social media. So it's so important. And also, you think how logistics has changed, how Amazon has completely changed consumer expectation. I used to joke, you used to have to predict red sweater in November, 100,000 units. Now I need the red sweater in 24 hours to someone in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Oh, it's the wrong size. I need to be able to get a label in a box to this guy so he can return it. And I can't ship it back to a DC in Bergen County or Long Beach. I got to find the closest store or the closest, get it right back out. It seems simple. It's actually very expensive and very, very complicated.
Absolutely. And it's to the point that you make, right? It's The reason why chief supply chain officers are now kind of stepping into those CEO roles is just because of the complexity, right? Like if you look at how complex the supply chain of each individual organization has ended up becoming and what they are doing to coordinate all of that, they are already running a company inside a company, right? Like with the amount of complexity they deal with, that is a natural course to become CEOs. And I think we are going to see more and more of that coming in the future.
Yeah, and there's massive inefficiency because what a lot of people did overnight is, oh, I want BOPUS, get me BOPUS. Oh, I need to do free, get me this, get me this, get me this, get me this. And so people tried to quickly implement a lot of strategies because I think people never took e-commerce as serious as really it should have been. And COVID really accelerated that. Now, to me, e-commerce doesn't mean having a website. Everyone has a website. It's the multi-channel. It's being able to sell to your customer where they are instead of making your customer come to you. That could be on TikTok or Instagram, but it's also going cross-border. It's being able to get the product to them quickly. You need a frictionless experience with that customer. And we saw the companies that really have invested in this and took this seriously really were able to do quite well. But I think there's, in the race to kind of set up some of this technology and implement some of these best practices, there's going to be a lot of undoing and redoing. And there's a lot of, the supply chain is very, very inefficient. I think a lot of people think the supply chain is a secret sauce. An efficient supply chain is very, very valuable. But a supply chain in itself is not a secret sauce unless it's running at scale and it's running really, really efficiently. So I think a lot of people have a lot of work to do when it comes to really, optimizing their back end.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at that 2010 timeframe when kind of direct to consumer, we got to do this e-commerce thing, right? Like I remember working for certain companies back in 08, 09, 2010 timeframe that were like, e-commerce, it's just like the thing that we have to do because everyone else is doing, and implemented solutions around their distribution footprint as an example, right? Like, so whatever was fulfilling to their stores, they said, okay, let's do this little project on the side. And it evolved from there. And it's such a significant part of the business now. And especially for the larger companies, it's much harder to decouple that. There's also the other side of it. For the digitally native organizations, right? So the brands that grew purely off of like the growth of Shopify as an example, right? Like that accessibility, that Instagram access, the Facebook access, the paid media, etc. One of the things we saw was the margins were good when you were brands, right? Like let's keep Amazon aside, but the margins were good. People were willing to pay for shipping and it was a good old happy, jolly time for everyone. And I think now the pressures have started building. It's much easier to get into e-commerce, right? Like people are finding through, companies like yours, how do I do sourcing? And specifically pandemic sped that up so much that so many people got into this space that the margins are starting to thin and you need to find efficiencies within the supply chain, right? Like it was okay back then. It's no longer okay. You need to have a really good supply chain strategy if you are going to scale further.
I'm happy you brought up DTC because this is a topic I think that needs a little bit more attention. A lot of companies package themselves as a tech company, went out and raised a lot of money on the promise that they were going to cut out the middleman, they were going to cut out retail, they were going to cut out wholesale, they were going to deliver a superior product at an affordable price, at a better margin, and wow, we are digitizing this entire process. What we've seen in the past couple of years is this is not true. We did our conference a couple of weeks ago, and Andy Dunn, I actually think I have his book, it's actually right here. He just wrote a book, Burn Rate. It's Launching a Startup and Losing My Mind. Unbelievable guy. So candid about the struggles he's had personally, but I thought it was so interesting how he got on stage and said, I pretty much invented a terrible business model. And he said, when you have a brick and mortar retailer, let's say you pay no more than 10% to your landlord. He goes, but I was paying 30, 40% to Meta. That's a very expensive landlord to get a customer. He goes, my most profitable channel was Nordstrom. Our most profitable, we were making money in the stores. He was smart, very small footprint, very, great locations, but no inventory in the store. So he had this kind of like, try on, and other people are doing this now, but it was enabled him to get into brick and mortar very quickly and scale. But he says that part of the business was supporting his digitally native business. And he says, if you look at pure play digital, how many people, other than some of the Amazons or whatever, have really been able to turn this into a very, very healthy business? And I think as first party data becomes more and more important, the consumer acquisition costs are going through the roof. So yeah, 5 years ago, you and I could do Eddie's t-shirts and acquire customers at X. Now that is probably 4 to 5 times more expensive. What we're seeing, we saw this last year when Warby Parker tried to go, or went public, and Allbirds went public. They opened up their books. And for the first time, what did we see? A ton of losses. And their path to profitability and growth is wholesale and brick and mortar. And whoa, the very business model you said you set out to disrupt, you're essentially recreating. So it's not that DTC is bad. DTC is part of what I believe of every retailer's distribution strategy. I don't think really being pure play, yes, there's going to be these cases where people do well. You could have, I know a guy, he's got a $5 million denim business. He makes himself $1.5 million a year. Great business. I would love to have it. Those are anomalies. There's also a large wholesale company attached to that. So he has economies of scale and he has infrastructure he could tap into. But you and I just starting a business from scratch, calling it DTC and saying we're reinventing the industry, I think it's a little extreme. And I think the valuations are going to show it. People are going to start having difficulty raising money at tech multiples. And I think there's going to be tremendous pressure right now for these operators to start running profitable DTC companies. And that's going to create multi-channel distribution strategies. And I think we're also maybe going to see more mergers. We saw this already with some of the brands. Some of the DTCs getting bought by the legacy brands and retailers and vice versa because they need the marketing savvy, the social savvy, some of the agility that the DTC management has. But the DTCs need the infrastructure and the organizational and operational know-how of some of these legacies. So together, there's some good marriages there. So I expect to see a lot of deal flow in the next couple of years.
That's so interesting you say that because, all along when we were seeing like these valuations on brands, that looked like as if it was a software as a service company, right? Like 10x on the top line. I mean, who does, top line valuations in, a standard business of that nature? And we are starting to see that in the market as well. And to your point, the ones that are really smart, we are also starting to see them explore new channels, right? So B2B is all the rage now. You are seeing all brands, right, like that have done really well through pandemic are coming to that realization that we need a good B2B strategy to be able to get into the retailers and start selling into that. So really good advice. Are there other channels that you would ask these DTC brands, right, that grew organically, went after valuation, that they should be looking forward to, right? Like creating stores is a really hard concept for a lot of these brands. They just don't have the footprint. What would you say? Like what should they be seeking to ensure that they can sustain and survive the potential bloodbath of devaluation that might be coming?
That is a very hard question to answer because each brand, depending on the vertical you're in, the price point you're in, category you're in, the answer is different for everybody. I was talking to a luxury company the other day, and they were saying they weren't having much success with Amazon. Well, why are you not on Net-a-Porter? Why are you not on Farfetch? Well, is that a good idea? Yeah, that's a great idea. This idea of selling socially. A lot of companies now are doing a lot of social commerce. They're working with media partners, and they're finding ways to push product through content. The suggestion, I think, in the headline here is, it used to be the customer came to you. You now have to meet the customer where they are. If they're on TikTok today, then you better be on TikTok. If they're on XYZ tomorrow, you better be on XYZ. Now, TikTok may not be right for LL Bean. I'm just making that up right now. I don't know if my father is on TikTok. It may be better for a Gen Z and millennial brand. The same way, like, you got to know your channels, right? But I think that over-distribution, too, is very deadly. We see a lot of brands, new management comes in, they cut too much to off-price. They open too many outlet stores, chasing growth at any cost. What do? Very quickly, they grow top line. They do have some profit, but now the brand gets devalued. No, I don't want to buy it at Nordstrom's for $100 if I could get it for $30 here. I don't want to spend for $200. So there's a very fine line here in distribution, and I think that Wall Street does a very big disservice to our industry because they reward never-ending growth at all costs. And to do that, you have to buy inventory, and you have to keep trying to expand your distribution channels. I think there is nothing wrong, and I know this is not going to work for every company out there, for being a lean and mean, profitable company, having a clean P&L, not being heavily levered. What is wrong with that? So, that's what I would preach. Just don't acquire customers saying, the lifetime value is X and never really realize that. Don't buy inventory without testing the product. Find retail partners that are going to support you, not just be transactional. Everyone I talk to today, I sell at Nordstrom. You sell online and it's a drop ship.
Exactly.
You have all the liability. They don't. Now, yes, they're carrying your brand. They're taking a chance that you're going to send the right quality. They're taking a chance by putting your brand on there. But I'm saying it's a low risk proposition because you're taking all the risk. So
Agreed.
Also don't get in bed don't start cutting all this inventory without guaranteed sales either. You have to really control your inventory. And that's true whether you're Walmart or you're a $500,000 Shopify business.
Makes sense.
Maybe to that point, Eddie, being, obviously very focused on sourcing and the soft goods sector, like what are you seeing today as far as, what type of purchase orders are being cut? Kind of going back to your red sweater, example, like, are you seeing smaller POs for less SKUs? What trends are you kind of seeing that might, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is that a predictor of what's going to be coming in the next quarter, the next year? Like, how is what's going on in supply chain and the type of inventory that's being purchased, how does that kind of predict what's to come?
I always like to say, because people always like to call and say, what are you seeing upstream? I say it's the closest thing to probably insider trading there is, right? You can see, you can see 3 to 6 months ahead. What I'm hearing from the factories, again, this is a macro, at a macro level, so certain categories are performing better than others, is we're seeing anywhere from a 20 to 30% reduction in order bookings for Q1. Some companies could be 40 or 50%. If you're a home brand that's, in the mass market and you really took a hit because people are buying less homes and everyone bought a couch. But let's say 20, 30%. Now, why is that? One, people are working through a lot of excess inventory. Two, a lot of things because of logistics issues in the past year came in late. So if a boot came in March instead of October, you hold it and you bring it back out if you can. And then I think there's a rationalization. People are saying, okay, well, we probably overbought. Well, you definitely overbought last year. And I like to speak to that point. But so let's bring it down. Now, does that mean that the entire year is going to be 20, 30, 40% down? I would say no. I think that for the most part, people in this industry swing to extremes. For the first 6 months of this year, we imported 24% more units of apparel, which when you adjust that for inflation, that's 40% more value of apparel in the first 6 months of this year. Now, answer me this. How, after a record 2021, companies that should have been bankrupt had record profits because there was so much scarcity they could sell at full margin, that they went ahead and thought that the American consumer could consume 24% more product. And this is not a one-off company thing. Collectively, this is the Otexa data. This is the import data. So, of course, we're working through an inventory problem right now. I think we're going to see a lot of chase happen. But I think the most important thing that needs to be discussed is that stop referencing 2021. Stop referencing 2019. These are not barometers. There's no historical data right now which is going to tell you what the future is. And I think that we have to look at society first to understand how to, and that's going to help us judge and figure out where to go with our clothing. So in 2021, if you're an activewear, a casual company, you did very, very well. So they overbought, they're soft now. But what was the mistake? Everyone thought they could sell yoga pants. Not everyone is a yoga pant manufacturer. On the flip side, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day. She runs about a $100 million dress wear company. And I'm like, oh my God, you must be dying. She goes, best year ever. Casual dresses, best year ever. People are going back to work. People are going out. But she goes, Eddie, I went from 0 in 2020, there was no dresses, to my best year ever. But she goes, I'm already telling my board we're going to be down next year. Not down to like 2017, but down off of this year because this is not the new normal. But she's intelligent. She's not saying this is the new normal. Let's grow 20% on that. She's actually saying we're going to go down 10% because that is really where she believes normalized demand is going to be. So I'm wearing a suit today, which is a fluke because I have a meeting I have to go to and I have a gala tonight. But I used to wear suits 3-4 days a week. The truth is I go to an office 3 days a week now. If I was an individual that wore suits 5 days a week and now I only go in 3 days a week, the amount of dress shirts I need has gone down by 40%. Whether you're Brooks Brothers, you're Charles Tyrwhitt, you're Canali, you're a custom guy, I don't care. There's nothing you can do to get me to wear a dress shirt 5 days a week now. I always say this, and I've used this analogy so many times. The deli around the corner. I used to buy 5 chicken salad sandwiches a week. Now I buy 3. Essen's business is down 40%. I didn't quit my job. I didn't get rid of my office. I didn't move out of New York. Nothing but that one little change in how we operate our lives resulted in a 40% decline in their business. What are they going to do? There's nothing they could do to get me to go in there 5 days a week right now. But I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is I don't know if this is temporary 3 days a week. I don't know if we go back to 5. Are we going to end up being remote? Are we going to land on 2? So my caution is to not, the high is never as high and the low is never as low. We don't know what the new baseline is going to be. If you're having your best year ever, is that because I haven't bought a dress shirt in 4 years and now I'm going to buy 5 of them? Or I haven't bought a dress in a couple of years and hey, I'm going back out. Maybe I lost some weight, I gained some weight. Hey, all I did all day was run in the park, so I bought 5 pairs of Nikes in 2020. Am I buying 5 pairs? What is normal going to be? And try to stay as lean and agile as possible until we get to that new level, because we don't know what that level is.
Then what does lean and agile look like, right? From a sourcing standpoint, are manufacturers willing to now do same price, smaller POs as an example? Is that what you do? Like, do you then kind of rely more on just in time? And how does just in time look like? From how much do you order if there is no predictor? Because my opinion is, for some of the companies next year, it's going to be cyclical, right? Where you are going to under order and be sitting in a different scenario coming into next year, right? Of course, like your friend, smart people are going to, gauge, be like, okay, it's going to be less than where we are. But that could also end up becoming a problem. So is there now the appetite with inflation and everything that's going on for the manufacturers, for, your sourcing to be able to negotiate on that side, on a smaller PO, but in higher frequency?
Well, let's start by what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like a 6 or 9 month calendar that now you expand to 12 months because you say, I don't want to get caught without back to school, so let me bring it in June. Let me bring it in April. Mm-hmm. Oh, now I'm going to predict 12 months out what I... No. You're going the wrong way. Now, I understand why people did this when there was a supply issue and you tried to protect yourself because you didn't want to lose your job because you had empty shelf. Again, let's just call that a one-off moment in time because that's not a normal supply chain. I think, we've been studying Zara for as long as I've been in the industry. It's at every business school, it's at every college, it's at every retailer. No one can do what they do. Now we're studying Shein, and no one can do what they could do. Now, I could understand if you're not a vertically integrated retailer, how do you make those decisions? It's how they buy their product. And what I tell people is not all product is the same. So if you're buying a black t-shirt, you could take 6 months to buy that, go to a longer lead time country, negotiate price, because you have a pretty good sense of how many of those you're going to sell in a year. And God forbid it comes in a little bit late or a little bit early, or it's not a perishable product. But fashion is very, very risky. So I like to say you got fashion, core. What do you do with fashion? That is the stuff that you have to empower your team to make quick decisions, buy smaller units, pay a higher price. Because it's not the cost of the FOB that matters, it's the margin out the door. So I'd rather buy 1,200 pieces, air it in, get it into the store. Holy shit, it's working. Let me replenish it. Now, do I need to replenish it in 6 weeks and air it in, or is it becoming a fashion core product? Can I grandfather it? Do I go back and do I boat it in? The issue is when you look at the American retailers and brands, send me the tech pack, resubmit the lab dip, let me do this. The merchant says this, the buyer says this, the seller says this, the planner says this. Oh, the sourcing says I need it 5 cents cheaper. Oh, I want to change the trim. Oh, you missed the trend. Someone sees something on Instagram today, they want it tomorrow. You can't wait 9 months. So I actually think the factories who get a lot of, they're in developing countries, they're the ones that invest in a lot of technology. They're the ones that put all the money into sustainability because they have to do it without a single order. They're more willing to accommodate and work with you, but it has to be a partnership. You may have to take positions on raw materials. You may have to take positions on lines. You may have to give a certain amount of booking, certain amount of grage, so you are able to react. It's not that a factory is sitting there saying like, oh, you want this in 4 weeks, I can do it. But if your business model is, I want to be moving things out every 4 weeks. I know that I need this much fabric. And it's just a different mindset. And it's not bully your factory partner. It's how are we going to change the way we operate? I remember sitting in Porto. There were 3 designers from one of the largest European retailers, and they were using a number 2 pencil. And they sat there and they drew things with available fabric. And 2 days later, they came back, they saw the sample, and they bought it. Think of the power that retailer was giving these merchants. I don't know too many American companies that empower their merchants to do that. So I think it's a cultural shift. It's a mind shift. It is possible. Yes, the lines are being reformulated a little bit. I think the days of 1 million widgets at $1 CM, every factory loves it. They realize that they have to operate differently. But again, it doesn't have to be the same price. It has to be the right price to get it out the door.
Maybe to that point, Eddie, we just talked about, the where, the quantity, but what about the where? Like, are you seeing anything as far as, we're talking about all things offshore, but onshore, nearshore, are you seeing any uptick in POs being cut closer to home?
Absolutely. I mean, if you would have asked me that 6 months ago, every time someone called me for an introduction to a factory in Peru or Mexico, they were at full capacity. They're like, Eddie, we don't need any more orders. Good problem to have. They're trying to scale, obviously. But you also have to remember, even if Peru quadrupled their output, it's still a fraction of China. I think that there's going to be more interest in nearshoring because here's the other thing. When logistics costs got very expensive, it's shorter to ship it from Central America. You have duty savings. You got the Uyghur Forced Protection Act. Well, a place like Peru grows their own cotton. It's vertical. Even as we try to become less reliant on China, what we're finding out is we're still reliant on China. Because if I'm doing the CM somewhere, but the trims and the fabric comes from China or Taiwan, what happens if something between China and Taiwan happened? All the technical fabric coming from there. There is a lot of risk, and this is a headline that's underreported. There's a lot of geopolitical issues right now in the supply chain. A junta in Myanmar, inflation in Sri Lanka, a power issue in Pakistan, a currency issue here, a president assassinated there, Ukraine has the issues here, China. So it's not that one place is safe. I just think that we got spoiled by having decades of almost like borderless trade. You placed an order, it came to you. Now I think we have to assess risk. Ethiopia is not part of AGOA anymore. What does that mean for working in Africa? What does that mean for your investment? To answer your question, the answer is there's going to be more people moving closer to home. I think there's going to be investments made in nearshoring because in order to really have a model like I'm saying and chase and do that, a lot of people already are doing that in China. But why does Zara work in Romania and Poland and all those? Because it's a nearshoring model. Yeah. It's for speed.
And as you see some of this, right, like it's a matter of diversification of your manufacturing and sourcing capabilities. What would be interesting is potentially some of the larger manufacturing groups in the Orient or Bangladesh, Vietnam, Pakistan, India, you'll see them start setting up shops in nearshoring capabilities as well, right? So now you might be dealing with the same partner, removing the risk, but you still got, I don't like saying this, but like one throat to choke again, right? Like, and yeah, you need to work with them as a partner. I completely agree with you, not as bullies, right? So I didn't mean it that way, but one throat to choke, one hand to shake, right?
But who made a lot of the investment in Bangladesh? Yes, there's the local entrepreneurs, but a lot of it came from Asia. I was on the phone the other day. This is a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing group based out of India, factories in Bangladesh. Now they're in Vietnam. Now they're in Guatemala. Now they're here. I'm like, what? They find factory partners. They buy into the factories. They take their know-how from people overseas. They bring it here. They set up. It's not a bad thing because you also have years of experience, right? Much better to have someone that has been operating a factory for 30 years take that know-how and set up shop. Maybe the capital is more secure because they're diversified. Also a beauty in being with someone that has factories like that. You could say, yes, there's risk associated with one partner, but God forbid something happens in country A, they have country B, C, D to go to. Yep. That's why I'm always very pro-agent. I worked as both an agent. I also worked as someone that represented factories directly. And I like the agency model. I'll tell you why. Agents got to work very hard. People, but you pay for an agent. I go, really? Because every time, even with the commission we got, it was still cheaper than what they could do direct, or they wouldn't work with us. But put price aside. They have to do all the sampling. They have to do a lot of product development. They have to do design work. They have to do the QC on the ground. They have to do all that, or they don't get paid. So unlike a country manager that sits here and gets a salary, an agent only gets the order if they win the order. And they don't sit idle now. They're coming to the States. They're coming there with stuff every day, designing. Look at this new fabrication. Look what I'm doing for this retailer. Why don't you think about this? Also, they bought 1 million meters of X fabric for $3.25. But because of scale, they're getting it for $275. Now, you could get that fabric for $275. When you were going to buy 10,000 meters, you're paying $3.25. So as we also talk about entering new markets, maybe you have an office in Shanghai. Maybe you have an office in Dhaka. Do you have an office in Karachi? Do you have an office in Peru? Do you have an office in Vietnam? When you want to enter new markets, sometimes there's economies of scale and boots on the ground is critical. I am very pro-agent. I also like competition in the supply chain. To me, it's not one or the other. I like to know if I was a CEO of a retailer, I'd be challenging my sourcing team to always be counter-sourcing, always finding new partners. And the problem is, When you delegate this directly to the head office, whenever I was a sourcing agent and someone said, okay, Eddie, go work with my team in Hong Kong, I go, no. I said, you're setting me up to fail, because if I can prove that I can source a better product at a cheaper price than they do, why are they going to want to expose their shortcomings? They're going to give you every reason not to work with me. I need to do this exercise in isolation of them, and then you need to compare the two and tell me what's important. Very hard to get that through, but you got to get to senior management, and they have to. It's not to create, competition in the negative sense, but it keeps everyone kosher. And you also will learn about your inefficiencies. You're also going to learn about what you're doing well.
Yeah, completely makes sense.
Like the last 3 or 4 minutes, I've just been sitting here thinking, here in the U.S., sustainability, first of all, sustainability has been talked about for more years than I've been alive, but it's starting to resurface again, right? I mean, the last 12, 24 months, you start hearing companies talk about the importance of sustainability, talk about how they are sustainable, because again, it's what the consumer or a segment of the population is looking for. How are you seeing that from, when we talk about onshore, offshore, all these different vendors, does sustainability come in? And what are some of the challenges? I think we were talking about in our prep call, is there visibility, right? Is there traceability to who is sustainable? And is that important when companies are looking for their partners in supply chain?
I think there's two important sound bites I'll give you to this. I think there's only two ways to incentivize people, or two ways to get people to change. One is through incentive, and one is through repercussions. And what I mean by that is either you're going to pay me more to do something, or you're going to punish me for not doing it. And I think what's going to happen in the business of sustainability is that there's already so much regulation in the EU. Everyone's a global retailer today. The Uyghur Force Protection Act may not be specifically about sustainability, but it's about traceability of your raw materials and your forced labor, or hopefully no forced labor. You have the New York Fashion Act, which is on the table. And so when this regulation passed, or whatever, it's coming. And if you don't comply, you're not going to be in business. So now it's not, I'm doing it because my customer wants it, Gen Z wants it, it's our ethos, you're going to have to do it. So that's number one. Number two, we just did this study with Alex Partners. We do an annual benchmarking study. We do it every year. And this was, to me, the most alarming statistic out of the whole report. And I recommend everyone to go to Sourcing Journal and download this, because there's a lot of things that would really scare you. Only 1 in 4 people are investing in talent. You started the hour by saying, there's all these new jobs or whatever. There's only less than 50% of people are embracing all this new technology. Most people are still using Excel, despite all the innovation and all the money. So a lot of stuff, and this is people responding, not me telling you, they're responding, this is their answers, the industry. But the biggest slide that stood out to me was the one on sustainability. 80% of people are now making some type of sustainable, or have some type of sustainable benchmarks, or creating some type of sustainable initiatives, or just sustainable claims, which is great. 80% of companies taking this head on. Fantastic. Less than 20%, 19% of them are tracking it. So what does that mean? And then the third stat was 56% of these people believe they're ahead of their goals. Well, how can you be ahead of something that you're not tracking? So right there, now you're lying. Two, you're ripe for two problems. If only 20% of you guys are tracking, that means you're making claims which you don't know are true, which means you could be on the wrong side of the headline for greenwashing. And we know how quick people are call out their brands. The second thing is, when the regulations come down, how are you going to be able to guarantee that what you're saying is true? Oh, you know what? Where are your transaction certificates? Or, oh, you get a WRO, your container gets stopped. Can you prove where your cotton came from? Oh, no. So all of this is for naught if you can't actually benchmark, track, trace, and actually verify. The one word here is accountability. And this shows me that people are not taking this serious enough. And regulation will whip them into shape, but we are a reactionary industry. And this is going to be something that's going to hit hard, because this is going to be very hard to fix overnight. You have to make investments. Yes, it costs money. I hate when people say, oh, there's no cost of compliance, there's no cost of sustainability. Wrong. Your chief supply chain officer, your chief sustainability officer. We had a speaker at our event in June at our sustainability conference. She was the VP of traceability at PVH. That title didn't exist 5 years from now. That's a company taking it seriously. You have products, the blue signs of the world, that could help you set your goals and benchmark your goals and track your goals. You have companies like Orotate and FiberTrace and Textile Genesis and Applied DNA. I'm not going to sit here and tell you which one to work with, but they're in business to help you trace your supply chain. Some use tracers, some use DNA, some use block, whatever it is, they're out there. If you're ignoring these companies and not future-proofing your value chain, your supply chain, you're going to get into trouble.
That's such a good point, right? Like for all along, sustainability has been top of mind. We have always kind of believed that the consumer expectation will drive behavior. And what is now, in the industry that's starting to happen is the regulations. And to your point, right, the European regulations are a little bit more stricter. And given that global standards, most companies are going to start following global standards. And I can pull from two other examples that are completely unrelated to this space. One is GDPR on the information security side, right? Companies were doing all sorts of janky stuff behind the scenes, tracking people. Europe came down and said, nope, not going to happen. That's why everyone gets the annoying pop-up these days, right, on every website that you visit about accepting or declining the cookies that are being tracked. And guess what? You can't just do it for Europe. You got a website. You got to do it for the entire world. Same thing with healthcare standards, by the way. On the specifically medical device, the European standards are super high, and any manufacturer is manufacturing worldwide. Once you comply to that, you got to comply to the rest of the world. So there is compliance will bend people into shape. But to your point, yeah, it might take a little bit of time, and hopefully we get the time.
That's my concern. Yeah, I think GDPR, that's a great analogy because you have the PA or whatever in California and Vermont. Yep. So it's not in all 50 states, but what are you going to do? Yeah. You could geo-target by IP, but the point is it starts in Europe, it comes to California, it goes to Vermont, it's going to hit all states. This is going to be business as usual. And how do you afford this? I don't have a simple answer. I think in an inflationary environment, the reality is I don't care what a customer said. Oh, I'll spend more. No, price is going to become number one because when you walk into Walmart with $100 and the groceries were $50 and now they're $70 and I have $30 left, I'm going to have to do what is best for my family. Take the luxury market out somehow. The more you raise a Chanel bag, the more people want it. Fine. For the other 99%, price will be an indicator. Now, sustainability, as I said, when it becomes part of, it's like putting like an ingredient label on a product. Like you don't buy food today without the label or having an FDA list. We need some type of regulation to standardize. So it's going to make it simpler. And also what's going to bring down the cost is scale. So if more people are working with these companies and more people are procuring organic and more people are buying recycled this and recycled that, well, then it brings down the cost. If more people are working with better factories, and the factories now have more money, they can invest in more and more of LED this and water this and laser this. You just can't put all the burden on the factory. You can't put it's got to be a shared responsibility.
Makes sense.
Eddie, we're about at time, and definitely want to hit you with one last question, though. I mean, you're right in the trenches, seeing what's going on in the sourcing world and seeing these, what type of POs are being cut. Obviously, super in tune with everything going on in supply chain. What is your outlook for the next 6-12 months?
It's a big question. I'm not an economist by trade. Do I think the stock market will hit 25,000 before 40? I actually do. Do I think things are going to get worse before they get better? Yes, I do, because unfortunately, a lot of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the media can really scare people to start to act in crazy ways, right? I see layoffs happening, I stop hiring. I stop hiring, you lay someone off. It's just very, very cyclical. Oh, maybe I don't need to take that vacation. Maybe I don't need to buy this product, because negativity brews more negativity, which creates this vicious cycle. However, I said this, I think, a couple times. The high is never as high and the low is never as low. And I think this time around, the fundamentals are a little bit different. I don't have the statistic. I was working out at a gym in Florida, and on the TV there was a segment. It talked about adjustable rate mortgages. In 2008, I'm making up these numbers right now, but it was something to this extreme. Let's say there was 20 million of them out there. There's like a million now. What does that mean is that even with interest rates going up, we're not going to see the amount of foreclosures because people are not going to wake up tomorrow and say, oh my God, my mortgage went from 2,000 to 8. Also, the lending, we tightened up our standards. So the money was not given out as freely. You don't have someone making 50 grand owning 8 properties and trying to become a landlord overnight. We still have very strong employment. So people are going to work every day. Maybe their dollar's getting stretched, but as long as people are working, they're spending. And they're spending, and they're spending. So that's going to drive consumption. What we have to do is not, like I said, scare ourselves into this really, really, really negative cycle. Could things be challenging? Yes. Could we slow? I don't care what the technical definition of a recession is. I think you ask most people, they say we're already in one. Interest rates, yeah, okay, it's simple economics. Interest rates go up, home values get impacted. Money gets more expensive, less people lend it out to businesses. All of these things are true. If you can't raise wages quick enough, then people could buy less. These are all things we all know. But do I think it's going to be a bloodbath like 2008? No. And I think that if people don't think short term, the same way I say, don't buy buy a million t-shirts when you really only need 500. Don't just start laying off to make the quarter. It's very hard to find talent in this space. Don't stop investing in technology to make the quarter, because you're going to need that technology. People said, oh, I don't need e-commerce. It's only going to be 5%, 10%. Well, you didn't invest. You got killed. Look, take the long view. Maybe Wall Street doesn't reward you. Maybe you don't get the biggest bonus ever. But I don't know how you go from giving 200% bonuses in January to laying off 10% of your staff 6 months later. Too extreme. I hope people are, like we said, if people are unable to raise as much money and they're forced to run a more profitable business, well, that's a good thing, actually. They'll be more sustainable, no pun intended, for the long term. So I see some short-term pain, but I also think, are things going to be better? I said don't benchmark 2019. Do I think things will be better than 2019? Actually, I do. I'll leave you with two very important anecdotes. And it's a very important power of the media and how it changes one's perspective. I like to say if I offered you both a stock and I said in 3 years it's going to be up 100%, would you be happy with that? Well, in March of 2020 or 2019, right? That's 3 years ago. Target was at $75. I think this week it's like 160. That's more than 100%. No one's saying Target up 100%. Well, I'm Warren Buffett. No, it says stock down 50% because it was 260. The fundamentals of Target are fantastic. Great leadership, great product, great service, everything great. Amazon headline, lays off 90,000. Oh my God, the world is ending. If Amazon is laying off people, no one is safe. The real headline should be Amazon added 800,000 jobs and grew their workforce 102% in 2 years. That is phenomenal growth. If that was the headline I woke up to, Amazon grows staff 102%, Target trading at 100% 3 years, I would say, life's pretty good. Let's go buy that. But that's not what the headline says. So it's amazing how we could have a glass half full, glass half empty. It's perspective here. Yeah. And like I said, it's dangerous what the mind can do.
Yep. Sage, wise words, my friend. This is really good. Thank you.
Yeah, love that, Eddie. So as a way to wrap up, Eddie, can you share with the audience how they can follow you, your handles on social media, and where they could learn more about Sourcing Journal?
Sure. So first of all, definitely visit sourcingjournal.com. We have over 100,000 people in the industry reading this. It's really, I'm not saying this because I'm behind it. I think being informed is so important today. If it's not Sourcing Journal, read another publication, watch another news chat. You got to know what's going on. Regulation is moving fast. Raw materials are moving fast. Logistics. Don't be caught uninformed, because that's a big problem. LinkedIn is a great way to stay in touch with me. I'm very active on there. Instagram, Edward Hertzman on LinkedIn, Edward Hertzman on Instagram, Edward Hertzman on Twitter. You can send me an email. I'm very accessible. Just don't slack me. I'm not into all this. I'm more of an old school kind of guy. I like to take the yellow cab, and I like to make a phone call. So, but yeah, reach out. You have any questions? If you disagree with what I had to say, I love to hear it. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe you are hearing order bookings are up. I mean, you're not, but hey, no one has a monopoly on good ideas. But no, definitely appreciate the time. Love being here, and be interesting to see what the next 6 months to a year brings.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie.
My pleasure.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to maximize your supply chain. Available on all major podcasting channels. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode.